Well, this is an exciting development. It's the Tone City Golden Plexi Mark III 2025, and we've got the third version of this iconic mini hot-rodded Marshall in a box style pedal. The original came out over 10 years ago now. The Mark II, which I actually have here in front of me as well, came out in 2022, and 3 years later we have the Mark III, tweaked again with an extra mini switch up here. What I'm going to do in this video is take you on a tour of the Golden Plexi Mark III. I'll tell you about the specs and the features, then I'll play it for you in as many different musical styles as I can possibly manage today, and afterwards I'll give you a few more in-depth opinions about the Golden Plexi Mark III. Tone City sent me this pedal a few weeks ago to have a bit of fun with and to make this video with, and I do have quite a lot to say about it. So stick around for that, and timestamps to everything are going to be down there in the description if you'd like to move to the part of the video that suits you. Don't forget to like and sub, but now let's kick in with the specs and features. So when the original Golden Plexi came out over a decade ago, it was sub 50 Great British pounds, and it became famous through Andertons. Rob Chapman and Lee Anderton made a great video about it, and I think they sold bucket loads of this pedal in the past 10 years. In 2022, Tone City quietly brought out the Mark II of the Golden Plexi with a few tweaks, a lower noise floor, and a slightly easier to control gain knob, for example, were some of the mods that they did there. And now, 2025, we now have the Mark III, or the version 3, and they've made some tweaks to this one as well. The noise floor should be even lower, and they've made the gain knob even more easy to tweak. And I say even more easy, but back in the day it used to be that you'd have no gain, you'd turn it up 0.5 millimeter, and then you'd be turned up to 11 straight away, and the rest of the gain knob sweep would be basically the same thing. But that's what you're buying this pedal for. It's a Marshall wall of sound. Anyway, the controls on the Golden Plexi Mark III are very similar to the previous editions. We've got a big gain one here, a smaller volume one here, and a smaller tone one here, and this two-way switch is labeled mod. Now when this mod switch is over to the right, as it is here, we're in a lower gain mode, and when it's over to the left, we're in a higher gain mode. It's as simple as that. And on the Tone City website, they say that within this pedal you have the original Golden Plexi circuit and the slightly more refined Golden Plexi 2 circuit. So this combines the previous two, and we get to enjoy both of their goodness. How different do they sound? Well, you'll find that out in the playing part of the video in a second. But that's it really. It's a super simple pedal. Now it's a mini pedal, so no space for a 9-volt battery, so you'll power it via a standard 9-volt power supply. Your ins and your outs are here, and that's it. My rig for today is going to be my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 amp head. We'll be on a pretty neutral clean setting with just a smidgen of reverb for the playing part of the video. I'll play a bunch of riffs in as many different styles as I can, and for the guitar today I'm going to be using the rather wonderful 2025 Ibanez AZ Standard HSS model. That has a coil split for the bridge humbucker, and it has 2 single coil pickups as well, so you're going to hear a nice mix of single coil and humbucker riffage in this video, so there should be something for everybody. Once I'm done with the riffs, I'll bring in my Boss RC10 looper, we'll play a rock loop through the pedal, and we'll compare it to the Golden Plexi 2, tweak the knobs, hear how different and how similar they sound, and you'll know hopefully by then whether or not the Golden Plexi Mark III is the one that you should be spending your money on. Enough talk then, let's play the Golden Plexi Mark III now, and we'll speak in a bit more detail about it afterwards. Okay then, so that was the Tone City Golden Plexi Mark III, and I hope you enjoyed the playing, the tones, and the riffs. And boy, were the riffs to play today, because the Golden Plexi Mark III does exactly what its previous two brothers and sisters did, and it turns your generic clean amp into a snarling wall of sound, Marshall rock and roll goodness. I have to say that straight away. You can turn off now if that's all you needed to hear, because that's what it does. But now a few more in-depth opinions from my side about this pedal. I'll start by telling you the things that I like about it. And first, well, it's those sounds. It just sounds like a huge roaring Marshall Plexi of an amp. Turned up to 11, I have to say. This is not a subtle pedal in any way, shape or form. It doesn't really like to do push cleans, especially with humbuckers. With single coils, you can get away with it, as you'll have heard in the playing part, but straight away have the gain up at about 9 o'clock and it just wants to rock out. So it was great for classic rock tones. If you love your AC/DC or your Airbourne riffs, as I do, well, you'll love this pedal for that. It's fat and it's mid-pushed and it's raucous and it just sounds huge. For indie rock and alternative rock as well, I found it to be great as well. Had the gain all the way down pretty much for most of those settings and for the push clean tones too, and it kind of gets you there. But if you want a lower gain Marshall Plexi sort of a pedal, you're probably going to have to look elsewhere, because this one just wants to rock and roll. And once you're past 9 or 10 o'clock, it is just a thick, fat and almost slightly woolly, vintage Marshall-y sort of a sound. Great for classic rock, great for harder rock as well, fantastic for punk rock too, and alternative rock in a slightly heavier way. Once you get up to metal and you down tune to drop D as I did, it does do that chuggy sort of thing, but it won't do super tight, modern, progressive metal sort of stuff. If you really want to play staccato riffs, you'll probably want to stick a tube screamer or something in front of this pedal. But it does do classic metal and sludgy, stonery stuff in a fantastic way. It is an absolute riff machine. It sounds fantastic. It's not the most versatile pedal in the world, but that's not what you're buying the Golden Plexi Mark III for. You're buying it because you want a Marshall turned up to 11 on your pedal board, and that's exactly what this delivers. What else do I like about it? Well, it's tiny in terms of size, so it's going to fit on pretty much any pedal board. It's going to be super cheap as well. I suspect about $60, $65 or 65 euros, so very much an affordable pedal, and pretty much anyone is going to be able to add this to their rig. Build quality, I think, is fairly decent. It's built like a little brick, nice solid metal chassis, the knobs and the pots and the switches all feel fairly decent, so I don't think it's going to break anytime soon either. And of course, this is the most versatile of the Golden Plexi pedals to date, thanks to this two-way mod switch. Now I do have to say, and you'll have heard that in the loop part best, I think, that the difference between the two mod settings is not that great. I think you'll probably find the one that suits you best and stick with that. For me personally, it's to have it over to the right, which is the so-called lower gain setting, although it's not really low gain in any way, shape or form. That just worked better for me, but you'll find the one which works best for you. So there's a whole lot to love about this pedal. What don't I like about it so much? Well, pretty much nothing. You know, it's tiny, it's cheap, it sounds huge, it's loads of fun, it's a Marshall on steroids. I absolutely love it. But if there was one thing that I could pick where I'd say I'd quite like it to be different in this sort of a way, I'd choose the gain thing, and I'd make it a little bit easier to dial in some more low gain tones with precision. It's kind of a bit like a Rat pedal in a way. I don't know if you've ever really played with a Rat pedal much, but you have the gain down nice and low, and it's kind of like a clean boost for a bit before it really kicks in. Then you kick it in 0.5 millimeter and you get some sort of throaty, crunchy tones. Kick it in another 0.5 millimeter and you're straight away in Marshall turned up to 11 Rock City. And that's great. That's why we're buying this pedal. But for me personally, sometimes when I'm playing the indie rock, the alternative rock, it would be cool if it could be just a little bit easier to dial in those gain tones on the lower side of the spectrum with just a little bit more precision. But at the end of the day, I think that's a minor thing because you can do it. And like I've said repeatedly in this video, that's not why you're buying this pedal. So if you've been watching this video and you like the idea of the Golden Plexi Mark III, but you're wondering what other Marshall in a box style pedals are out there, well, you're in luck because there are hundreds and hundreds of them. I think pretty much every pedal company has made their own Plexi pedal or their own Marshall in a box over the years. In some cases, they've made many of them. And well, here's a couple of my favorites that you could try instead of the Golden Plexi Mark III. Now, my favorite at the moment is actually a recent one. It's the 2025 Marshall 1959 Super Lead pedal. Yes, Marshall themselves make my favorite Marshall in a box these days. That is a wonderful pedal. Came out of nowhere seemingly in January 2025 at the NAMM show, but it's a wonderful pushed Plexi. It does lower gain sounds great, medium gain fantastic, and it does great higher gain tones too. So that's a fantastic pedal to try, albeit at least twice the price of the Golden Plexi Mark III. Now, some of my other favorites I can run through. The Bogner Lagrange is fantastic. The Wampler Plexi Drive is a brilliant Plexi pedal, and there's a mini version as well, which is going to be the same size as this. Or you could try something a bit rarer, like the Ramble Effects Marvel Drive Mark III. Those are all going to be significantly more expensive than the Golden Plexi Mark III though, so if you're looking for something more this sort of price range, well, you could do far worse than trying something like the NUX Fireman or the Joyo Uzi. Those are both fantastic high gain Marshall in a box style pedals that are really, really versatile too. And hey, if you ever find a Golden Plexi Mark II or an original used for a cheap price, pull the trigger because they're fantastic pedals as well, and they really do sound very similar to the Mark III. At the end of the day then, I'm a huge fan of the Golden Plexi Mark III, and I think first and foremost, it's just a massively fun pedal. Turn this thing on and it's like you've got a Marshall, you've turned it all the way up to 11 and you're just rocking out. It's got that huge, fat, iconic rock and roll sound that you'll know from so many of your favorite records and your favorite players, and you can switch this thing on and get those vibes instantly. It also happens to be tiny, so it'll fit on any pedal board. It's really affordable, so I think pretty much anyone watching this will be able to afford it. And in terms of the build quality, it's decent enough too. So all round it gets 2 thumbs up from me. And if you're considering adding some Marshall goodness to your rig and you're on a tight budget, or you're not on a tight budget, this one should definitely be on your shortlist to check out. I really love it. It's going on my board straight away, and well, 2 thumbs up again. I hope this video has answered answered all of the questions that you may have had about the Golden Plexi Mark III, but if there's anything else you'd like to know, drop me a line down there in the comments and I shall do my best to answer you to the fullest. If you're still around, it would really make my day if you wanted to like the video or maybe even sub to my channel, because that really does help. But that's been it for today. I've been Rich and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.